We have to pay to get in?
It could cost you your life.
Hello and welcome to Fast Return. I'm Sean.
And I'm Ethan. And this time we're talking about the Five Doctors.
An anniversary special.
Yeah.
I was excited for this one.
Yeah.
I've only seen it once before. Isn't that shocking?
It's really the closest thing that Classic Who ever got to a movie, isn't it, really? It's very much like a celebration of everything that Classic Who was.
Do you want me to read out a summary?
Fancy another one?
By all means, go for it.
The Time Lord's death zone on Gallifrey becomes the stage for a dangerous game when a mysterious figure uses the time scoop to abduct the Doctor's first 5 incarnations, along with several companions from their timelines. They are brought to the death zone and forced to confront deadly traps, including Daleks, Cybermen, and a Raston warrior robot as they journey to the Dark Tower at its centre. The mastermind behind the scheme is revealed to be Barusa, the president of the Time Lords, who seeks immortality through the legendary powers of Rassilon. However, his plan backfires when Rassilon tricks him, turning him into a living statue. The Doctors, their companions, and the Master, who has his own agenda, escape the death zone, and the Doctors return to their respective timelines.
Brilliant.
The 5 Doctors in a nutshell.
One day, I shall come back. Yes, I shall come back. Until then, there must be no regrets, no tears, no anxieties. Just go forward in all your beliefs and prove to me that I am not mistaken in mine.
So the episode starts with William Hartnell's "One Day I Shall Come Back" speech.
Yeah.
Which was a really nice way to open it, because obviously he's not in the episode, but it was such a respectful way to get him in the anniversary special, because if not for Hartnell, no one would be there to do this special.
And he gets credited at the end as well. With all the other actors that played the Doctor, William Hartnell gets mentioned at the end as well.
And that goes straight into the title sting. And then we see the new console room.
Which looks good.
Yes, it looks brilliant.
It's nice that they felt it necessary to do that for the special, because I think it never really dawned on me how long the Fifth Doctor has the previous console for, but it looks bad as hell at the end of Tom Baker's era, and I think they must have put a few changes on it in the Fifth Doctor's era, but it needed a full refurb really, and it does look good.
I think it got quite battered and bruised over the years of being used and going into storage and having explosion effects attached to it. It was well overdue, I think.
It just looked very cheap, and this is very of its time, but at least it looks new and gleaming and all that sort of stuff. Do you know, it looks nice.
For an anniversary, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's exciting to get a new console room for an anniversary special. I think that's really cool. And we've got Tegan debuting her Cat Slater fur coat.
It's beautiful.
Which I love. That's a serve, if ever I saw one.
Yeah, her outfits are nice in this story.
The Doctor's like cleaning the console even. I really like that touch. There's a really nice bit of dialogue where Tegan says, "Are you finished?"
Finished?
Yes. Looks rather splendid, doesn't it?
But will the TARDIS work properly?
Of course, once everything's run in.
Didn't you repair anything?
Well, the TARDIS is more than a machine, Tegan. It's like a person. It needs coaxing, persuading, encouraging.
You mean it's just as unreliable?
I love it. I wrote that like they seem really settled, and I put, I love this era. And they're just chilling. So Turlough's not even in the TARDIS. He's outside drawing the alien landscape.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just love it. As an opening, I love it. I love that it starts slow.
I definitely think going into it now, you appreciate it in a slightly different way, because it's the first time I've watched it having seen season 20 beforehand. So it's like you do get all the little contextual things. Not that there's a lot going on, but like the little nods you get, it's nice to have them. And also, I should say, we watched this on the box set. So it's the first time we've watched this specific version that was done for the Blu-ray, which means that all the film inserts are actually proper HD. Well, they look much better than the DVD anyway.
So then we see Herndl portraying the First Doctor walking around a garden. No explanation as to what he's doing there. He's just walking around, and I just wrote sleigh. And he gets abducted by a triangle, doesn't he?
Yeah. It's more of like a triangular prism shape, isn't it?
Right.
In the original version, it's like a black sort of rectangle, like a rhombus sort of shape.
Okay.
And this one's more of a triangular prism in the revised version.
A cone.
Yeah. it's better than the tissue that was in the 90s one. Do you remember that like weird tissue shape?
Vaguely.
That's the 90s one.
I think this is a special edition and they updated some of the effects.
Yeah.
And something I did like about the updated effects in this one was when a doctor gets abducted or a companion, it leaves like a scorch mark on the ground.
Yeah.
I thought that was a nice touch.
Yeah, throughout a lot of this, they've updated the effects like they did on the 90s one, but generally they've been a lot less heavy-handed with it. So they've done it in a way that feels more true to the spirit of the original. But they've also done things like the scorch marks, which the 90s one didn't do, presumably because they weren't able to, where it makes the effects feel more part of the world. Whereas in the 90s one, they feel very much like slapped on top.
Mm-hmm.
Although there are a few instances in this, towards the end particularly, where I think they were a bit too heavy-handed with the effects. But for the time being, the scoop effect they've used for this is a lot better than the original one, in my opinion, and the 90s one as well.
My knowledge is a bit limited in terms of like comparing the original effects to the new effects, but I thought that for me, the most misplaced updated effect, I think it was updated, was when there were really beautiful model shots of the Dark Tower.
Yeah.
And they work through a modern lens, like they look phenomenal, like the artistry. But then they, in certain shots, kept like going in and recreating it with CGI, and that looks shittier than the model shots. Especially when the Third Doctor and Sarah Jane had scaled the zip line, they'd use a zip line to get into the tower.
Yeah.
And they'd like CG'd over the set. So the set was CG, and I just thought, just leave it alone. That's not something that needs updating.
Yeah, it's funny because that's one of the things I've seen about it is that quite a few people have said that they shouldn't really bother to replace the model shots because they were perfectly fine before. I think they shouldn't have replaced the model shots, you're right. And the more drastic stuff they changed, for example, when they're inside the Dark Tower at the end, there's that panning shot from the ceiling down to like the main set in the main chamber. Do you know where I mean?
Yes, exactly.
Like, if they wanted to do that, they should have put the resources into doing that and doing it a bit better rather than spending resources on replacing all the model shots. Because the model shots were fine. They didn't need to be changed, in my opinion. And like you say, when they blend it with the shots of Sarah Jane and stuff going down the zip wire, you can tell because it hasn't been textured the same.
Exactly.
So the film texture is missing from it. And it's like, they should have thought about that really.
There's an art to subtlety as well. And I think the team who work on these box sets do a phenomenal job.
Oh, yeah.
Especially on the more recent releases. Like, I think what they did to the Happiness Patrol was perfect. Like, they didn't mess with anything they didn't need to, but they expanded and added to that story with the special effects. It wasn't just replacing things. And also, I noticed in the new collection box sets, they don't replace model shots with CGI. They replace model shots with model shots. They create more modern models.
When they've got the budget to do that, yeah, they do.
I get that. I like that because it's still the same artistry, because we don't want model work to die out, and we don't want it to be replaced all of the time. No. So hopefully that opinion is shifting of, oh, that's a model shot, let's replace it with CGI because that's superior.
I mean, this was quite a recent box set. It's weird to me because some things they did replace in this that I think were better in the 90s one. You know, when the Cybermen go over the board towards the end, we're talking about the effects and stuff. The 90s version of that effect, I think, was a lot better. And the original 80s one's quite sporadic. It's just these little lines that come down. The one on this version is more like that than the 90s one. And it's a weird step back to me, that. But it's just nitpicking because I'm so familiar with the 90s one.
There's some choices that work and some that don't. But I think
most of them do.
Most of them do. And I think they're a lot better, especially with the most recent box set, at making the call, what needs to be messed with and what doesn't.
Yeah, I agree.
Things like that.
Whilst we're on the effects, actually, for the Eye of Orion as well. So this is the first example where, because they've got the original film, they'd done a few bits that were a bit different. So for the Eye of Orion, they'd widened out quite a few of the shots, pushed the camera back, and it meant that they could fill the sky in with planets and stuff and mist. And they did that quite a lot in the Five Doctors, this version. And it's really subtle, And it was so well done that I wasn't even sure if it was part of the 90s one or not. And it might have been, I don't know. But it's the first time I've ever noticed it. And it looks great. And it really makes it feel, it has that sense of scale. They do it in the Eye of Orion, and they do it whilst they're on the Death Zone as well. They did do a fantastic job. It's easily the most I've enjoyed the story, this version.
Yeah, it's
of all the other ones I've watched.
Really well put together as like a piece of work. It's like the ultimate way to watch it. There's no, I mean, we're nitpicking a little bit, but it looks amazing. Because I always follow the episode with the script, and whatever script I was reading, it did look like some scenes had been switched around a little bit, and I thought it all worked really well. Nothing felt awkward. So the Fifth Doctor gets affected by the First Doctor being abducted by the cone. Yeah. And he says he's got a twinge of cosmic angst. Yeah. I like that. Yeah, yeah. That's a great line. And then we're introduced to the Brigadier.
I'm sorry, sir, you're not allowed in there.
Not allowed? Me? I'm allowed everywhere. Oh, thank you.
Brigadier.
Good heavens.
Is it you?
Yes, yes. For once, I was able to steer the TARDIS. And here I am.
Yay. I love this scene.
I love how the Brigadier just keeps coming back. Obviously, we saw him in this season already, haven't we? Or is it the last season?
Yeah, Mordrin Undead.
Mordrin Undead, yeah. We had a multi-Brigadier story. Yeah. And now he's back again. Yeah. I had no idea in my head before we started becoming more familiar with the Classic Who era. I thought that the Brigadier was present in the Third Doctor's era, and then that was it, apart from one or two appearances. But it really feels like he never left because he just keeps coming back.
He always does, Nicholas Courtney. He never feels like he left when he comes back. Yeah, they were spoiled this year because they had him twice. Yeah. And that must have been the first time in a long time that they had him twice. I think since the Fourth Doctor's era, when he was in Terror of the Zygons, and a different one from that season.
Does the Sixth Doctor meet the Brigadier?
No, never.
Oh, that's a shame.
First time that he meets him is the Dimensions in Time.
Oh, God. In the East End. So he's chilling, isn't he, at unit headquarters?
Yeah, with his replacement, Colonel Crichton, sorry, they pronounce it in the episode.
I love the way that they introduced the Second Doctor into this story. It is brilliant.
It's chaotic.
Chaotic, perfect for the incarnation. And then the Brigadier introduces him to Colonel Crichton as his replacement. The Doctor says, yes, my replacement is pretty unpromising too. And I love that. I love it.
Troughton's always really good. And it's like, whenever he comes back in Classic Who, he's always like firing on all cylinders. And you can tell that he really enjoyed doing it. And he's definitely one of the best parts about all the specials that he comes back in. Because if you remember, he came back in the 3 Doctors, came back in the 5 Doctors, and the 2 Doctors.
God. Yeah, I was going to say that. He's another one that feels like didn't really leave because he kept coming back. It was nice.
On every occasion in Classic Who, whenever they brought back the Doctors, he was always one of the ones that was brought back. He never missed any of them.
Because he really enjoyed reprising the role, didn't he?
I think he often made sure that he was available when they asked him.
So that brings us on to somebody who wasn't happy to reprise their role. So Tom Baker is famously absent from this story.
Yeah.
Obviously only appears as like
pre-filmed inserts from Sharda.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a shame he is missed in this story, but also thinking about it, I feel like he would have taken it over a little bit.
That was the idea. He was going to get all the stuff the Fifth Doctor gets to do.
That's wrong because the Fifth Doctor is the current incarnation, isn't it?
Yeah. But that was the idea, was that he was going to be the one that was going to discover that it was Barusa, not the Fifth Doctor.
Right.
Which is baffling because, like you say, it should have been Peter Davison because he's the incumbent Doctor, isn't he?
He is. Tom Baker felt like he'd recently left it and it was too soon to return.
Yeah.
I wonder if he regrets it now.
He does.
He does.
He wished that he'd done it. Yeah.
That's
why he did Dimensions in Time.
Oh, wow.
Because he regretted not being part of the 5 Doctors and said, this time I'll do it. And then it was Dimensions in Time. So
I posted on Twitter a collection of photos that I found on the Black Archive of the photo shoot that they did for the 5 Doctors. And obviously Tom Baker wasn't there. So they borrowed the Madame Tussauds.
Yeah, so
Tom
funny.
Baker, the wax figure. And it's absolutely terrifying.
Yeah.
And they were having a right laugh with it and like lifting it up, like Troughton and Davison were lifting the figure up and just having a lark.
Yeah.
And somebody on Twitter replied and said that there's like an anecdote for that photo shoot where Liz Sladen was really unhappy that they'd used that figure, and she found it to be disrespectful to Tom Baker and was quite upset by it.
But it is a bit weird, isn't it? What sort of production standpoint says, oh yeah, this actor didn't want to come back, let's not respect that and let's use a mannequin of him in photo shoots? It's baffling. So
it's at P Bow Official tweeted that at me. So thank you for that, because that's very interesting. Because it was a very odd decision, but the photos are quite funny.
yeah, they are. Yeah, and to be honest with you, it's funny, the Fourth Doctor Shada stuff, given that it hadn't been broadcast at the time, so this was the first time people saw that footage, it does actually quite work. It could be a lot worse. Like, you get some nice stuff with Romana and the Fourth Doctor in a nice setting, which you otherwise wouldn't have seen. And it feels quite fitting. Even like when the scoop comes down and gets him like mid-punt, it's like that works quite well. I always thought. I've not seen Shada, so I don't know what in the context. I'm sure it makes a lot less sense once you've seen it in context. But for me, having watched the Five Doctors, I think it works quite well.
I like that we've
difficulty.
I like that we've both not seen Shada. That's one we can both discover, because they've released a lot of versions of that story in different like formats to complete it. But there was sort of an ultimate version done a couple of years ago, and that's the one that we should definitely watch. It's probably the most cohesive version of Shada that they did. Yeah,
I'm fairly sure it was on the box set. Season 17.
It did get its own release. I don't know if they would have included it.
Yeah, because the steelbook came out when they animated it, and then I'm fairly sure that version's on the box set. The Blu-ray box set.
I really liked as well when the Fourth Doctor got abducted, they added a special effect of the boat bobs and is like disturbed by the triangle thing, the scoop thing. They'd taken the time, because obviously they didn't want to add a scorch mark to a boat, but they'd like animated the water so it looked like the boat had the weight of the time scoop picking up the Doctor, and then when it flew off, it sort of bobbed. It was really cool. Little touch, I thought. Some brilliant scenes with the Second Doctor and the Brigadier, and some really lovely dialogue where the Doctor says to the Brigadier, I think our past is catching up on us, or maybe it's our future, when they see the time scoop coming for them. And they run together, and it's like, it's just so nice to see them like reunited and like it's straight back into an adventure, into the chaos of
all their dialogues, like really nice dialogue of the Brigadier and the Doctor like bickering with each other, and they are like an old married couple. But you know, all those scenes, it's just two actors walking around a quarry like over slate rock. But it's also funny because they're so good at like biting at each other and sparring off at each other. And the Second Doctor's progress through the Death Zone is really fun to watch in all the scenes it's in.
So it's worth noting that this was written by Terrance Dicks.
So his final televised script for the classic series.
So he's obviously a hugely revered Doctor Who writer.
Everyone loves Terrance, don't they?
And his list of credits, like his writing credits for Doctor Who, are insanely impressive. Like, I still think that as much as Moffat has written for Doctor Who, still doesn't touch Terrance Dicks' CV, do you know?
It was seen as being like reliable. You could go to him if you need help with something. I think that's what JNT saw him as anyway. And he was like a script editor for a while in the Third Doctor's era, wasn't he, I think? But then he also wrote a mountain of Target novels as well. And other bits and pieces as well. Every Doctor Who fan has got a book that's got Terrance Dicks' name in it, I'm sure. Everyone.
He just completely gets the show, doesn't he?
Yeah, I think people thought that even if he wasn't going to produce something that's completely remarkable, he would get something done that people would definitely enjoy. You know, he was seen as being like a reliable writer you could go to. And he definitely had his highlights for sure.
Apparently he wrote New Who books as well.
He might have done. I'm not sure.
Featuring the 10th Doctor and Martha Jones.
He might have done, yeah.
That'd be interesting to read. But anyway, sorry. So
Yeah, so models of the second Doctor and the Brigadier appear, don't they, in this mysterious room.
Yeah, on like a game board.
And a black gloved hand of a mysterious figure takes them off and places them on this board with action figures of the first Doctor as well. And it's clear that like some kind of game's being set up, isn't it?
I thought it was the Master.
You're sort of led to believe it's the Master, aren't you?
Oh, right. Okay, well, that fooled me then. So we're back to the Fifth Doctor and another absolutely beautiful piece of dialogue to describe the effects that his past incarnations being abducted is having on him. He says, great chunks of my past detaching themselves like melting icebergs.
Yeah.
And
I'm being diminished, whittled away piece by piece.
Exactly. And Tegan's getting more and more concerned. And the Fifth Doctor is really trying to reassure her, but it's obviously not working. I love how settled Turlough and Tegan feel. And I actually really like Turlough now.
Oh, that's good.
I like this new side to his character where he's like quietly sat outside drawing.
Happy. Yeah,
He's content.
It's weird because they seem quite good friends in this and they weren't really in the last story. So it's like, it does feel like there's been a bit of a time jump. I know they said they were going directly to the Eye of Orion, but it feels like it's been a few weeks to me.
Yeah.
Since the end of Planet of Fire. Sorry, King's Demons.
It does feel like maybe they've landed on the Eye of Orion and had a couple of days or weeks there, do you know? It feels like a time jump, but obviously it is picking up. And then we get the third Doctor driving down the road in Bessie.
Yeah.
We get the iconic line.
Great balls of fire.
Great balls of fire.
How handy for the third Doctor to have Bessie.
To have his wheels.
To have his wheels abducted with him.
Yeah, exactly. It does put him at a bit of an advantage.
Yeah. He does outrun it for a while. Thought he got away with it.
Good old Bessie.
And then he gets abducted after that.
Yeah.
And the gloved hand places his model in the third segment of the Pentagon.
Unfortunately, the gloved hand doesn't get a figure of Bessie.
No, why not?
Any number of reasons, presumably because they didn't want to make it, which makes sense.
Then we cut to Sarah Jane, who's living in Uxbridge. We used to live in Uxbridge, Hatch End. We were living down the road from Sarah Jane. Had no idea.
Is that where that is?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
West Common Road. Don't know where that is.
I never knew that.
But she comes out dressed like the purple one from Quality Streets. I don't know.
Just K9 outside.
She, bless her, debuts two hideous outfits.
Yeah, they didn't. Yeah.
I mean, she was so fashionable in the Fourth Doctor's era. All those iconic costumes. But they just couldn't be asked, could they? For this story?
I mean, it's probably a good thing they didn't put her in the Andy Pandy outfit, because that's probably not one of her strongest outfits.
Oh, but it is iconic.
It is iconic. But I feel like
she's grown up
very
past
Sarah
that
Jane.
now.
Yeah.
But, and K9's with her. So that's a continuation of K9 and Company.
Yeah.
Which is really cool.
Yeah.
And K9 is the only one in this episode speaking any sort of sense.
And he gets ignored, doesn't he?
He gets ignored.
Yeah.
Mistress, do not go out. And she's like, what is it, K9? Like, what? And he literally tells her, telepathic trace faint but rapidly increasing in strength. Do not go out.
She's like, lol, see ya.
She's like, no, I've got to go Summerfields. I need a bottle of Chardonnay. She says, I can't stay home. You have to give me a reason. And see, if she'd stayed, she could have been abducted with K9 and he would have sorted out this mess within 10 minutes.
He would have helped her out a lot. Definitely.
But the production side of things probably thought, K9, quarry, absolutely fucking not.
Well,
Leave him at home.
Yeah. Can you imagine?
My sensors indicate it is now extreme and the Doctor is involved.
And then she says, well, now I know you're imagining things. See you later. Yeah. And slams the gate door in his face.
I love the beware of dog sign. That's brilliant. I want one of those. We should recreate it and put it outside our house.
I remember watching The Five Doctors as a kid because it was one of the first DVDs to come out, and seeing K9 on this after seeing him in School Reunion was really cool because it was like, oh wow, that's when you see them together in the classic series. And of course I watched that not knowing that when she was traveling with the Doctor, she never actually had K9.
No, it was just for the spin-off, wasn't it?
Yeah. Which
I love, because Sarah Jane's become synonymous. In fact, the person who actually went off with K9 was Leela.
Yeah.
And she's not synonymous with K9,
No.
despite actually appearing with him in the show. But anyway.
Yeah.
No, I loved it all. And it's really funny to me because K9 is obviously this advanced robot from the future that the Doctor has gifted Sarah Jane. And she has it, God knows, hundreds of years before its actual invention or whatever. And she obviously doesn't hide it.
No, yeah, she just lets it wander around outside.
Yeah. And like the postman comes and there's a beware of dog sign and stuff. I just love that idea.
Danger! Doctor! Danger! Mistress!
So at this point is when the Fourth Doctor and Romana get abducted, but we've spoken about that already. But there is some iconic dialogue where Romana's like,
"Oh, I do love the spring. All the leaves, colours.
It's October.
I thought you said we were coming here for May week."
I did. May week's in June.
I'm confused.
So is the TARDIS.
Oh, I do love the autumn. All the leaves, the colours.
Yes.
I thought you said we were coming here for May week. And Tom Baker does that crooning voice. May week's in June.
and she's like, "I'm confused."
That's so funny.
And then she just like deadpan just repeats herself. Then she's like,
she changes it.
"Oh, I do love the autumn." I wrote there's such a couple. It's such an interesting dynamic because it really is two Time Lord tourists just exploring the galaxy
just
together.
larging it up in the galaxy.
And it's quite unique because there's no danger here. It is just like because obviously if there was a Doctor Who episode where nothing happens, that's not going to be a very interesting Doctor Who episode. But this, you really get them just chilling. They're just on a canal boat in Cambridge.
It's nice that you get a bit of this because their dialogue's like sparkling and they're really enjoying themselves. And I know it's part of a different story, but at the time it must have been nice to see this as part of the Five Doctors, do you know?
Yeah.
The setting's lovely that it's filmed in. But obviously they get caught in a time eddy, don't they? They get stuck. And it's the same reason why the first Doctor can't visit them physically in the Three Doctors. For the same reason behind the scenes, which is that the actor was unable to get to the set. Obviously the first Doctor William Hartnell was unable to in the Three Doctors, but in this one, Tom Baker wasn't able, didn't want to. But they blame it on a time scoop error both times. But then the Fifth Doctor starts wising up, doesn't he? He starts to realise that his past selves are being taken away.
So is that continuity from the Three Doctors then? Because Hartnell was stuck in the cone.
Time eddy.
Yeah.
I mean, they say that.
At least there's continuity between those two things. Although the first Doctor could communicate, couldn't he?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But anyway, we see more of the TARDIS set, the new one, and I wrote that it's absolutely beautiful. And I wrote they must have put a lot of money into this set, and clearly the BBC still had a lot of faith in the show and its longevity.
Oh yeah, definitely at this point.
That's the vibe that I got.
Yeah, I think they had faith in it. And then at the end of Colin Baker's first season, that's when things started to go wrong very quickly.
Oh yeah, that was it, because Trial of a Time Lord, is that his second series?
Yeah.
Baker's. Okay, cool.
I think basically they brought him on at the end of the Fifth Doctor's last season. It had a mixed impression from the audience because he tries to strangle Perry for like 2 episodes. And then there was that whole time for the audience to like fester about it. His season came out, which was seen to be good, competent, but very violent and dark, which it is.
And that's when Mary Whithouse had a lot of...
And then they got in trouble. And then the time of the Trial of a Time Lord, by the time that finally limped into broadcast, it was a lot shorter, and everyone was thinking, right, is this going to get made again or not?
Because that's
and then eventually it was.
They say that the show was on trial, so that's what the storyline was reflecting, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but I think at this point, it was all still rosy.
And then we meet a legend, an icon.
Lord President, Castellan, Chancellor Flavia. This is a very great and, may I say, a most unexpected honour. I may be seated. Now then, what can I do for you?
You are one of the most evil and corrupt beings this Time Lord race has ever produced. Your crimes are without number, and your villainy without end. Nevertheless, we are prepared to offer you a full and free pardon.
What makes you think I want your forgiveness?
We can offer you an alternative to your renegade existence.
Regeneration. A complete new life cycle.
What must I do?
The Master waltzes into a Gallifreyan meeting room.
Oh, yeah.
And he's in his same outfit from the King's Demons, so that was nice continuity as well.
Yeah, yeah.
He had no problem getting away in the King's Demons. He just waltzes into his Iron Maiden, didn't he? And just must have just taken off.
You don't really get a sense of how he got from A to B. Also, I feel like the Doctor and co, they've set off for Gallifrey now, haven't they? The Fifth Doctor and Tegan and Turlough.
For help, isn't it? Because the Doctor's like phasing.
Yeah, phasing in and out of existence. So Tegan and Turlough are like, come on, get on with it, send a message to the Time Lords and go. So he leaves, and that's when we move to Gallifrey, and we see the High Council room, and the doors open, and the Master saunters into the set, doesn't he? Yeah,
and there's obviously a very clear thread between what Gallifrey looked like in the Fourth Doctor's era, like the Deadly Assassin era, to now. That's what I thought. They visually looked very similar. They've clearly got a bit of a distinct design now for Gallifrey that they stuck with.
Yeah, this feels a lot more ornate than it did in the previous appearance of Gallifrey, which I think was actually the Arc of Infinity.
Okay, cool.
But we know that was the sets in that were very variable. Yeah. Some were okay, some weren't great. But this feels a lot more like a regal Gallifrey compared to that.
I love that the Master enters and Barusa, asking for his help, decides to open with just a complete and utter drag. You are one of the most evil and corrupt beings his Time Lord race has ever produced. And they offer him full and free pardon from his crimes.
Yeah.
And which is really interesting. And the Master says, "What made you think I want your forgiveness?"
Yeah.
I love it.
He sort of leans forward, doesn't he, incredulously. He's like, "What makes you think I want your forgiveness?"
He's just toying with them. It's great.
Yeah.
And I like that Castellan, he says, "We can offer you an alternative to your renegade existence." Mm-hmm. And they offer him regeneration, a whole new life cycle of regenerations, which is quite an offer.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's obviously continuity to New Who. Like, that's what Matt Smith gets, isn't it?
But also, it's quite interesting because the Master seems quite prepared to go when he finds out about what they're asking him to do, which is to rescue the Doctor. And the Master says,
"The cosmos without the Doctor scarcely bears thinking about."
I do like that line.
So do I.
Because it implies that he sees him as being like a perfectly worthy opponent. And that just kind of increases from now. I think the Master, prior to this, is a little bit one note. He's good enough in the Fifth Doctor's era, but now you get you get a hint that there's more of a hint of playfulness to their relationship.
Yeah.
And that kind of continues from now on because you've got the stuff in Trial of a Time Lord as well, where he's talking about he wants to be the one to kill the Doctor, not let anybody else do it. Do you know?
Yeah, exactly.
And this is where it starts, really, where it's a bit like he's clearly a bit in awe of him and likes to have like the procedure and the performance of it. Do you know?
He probably sees that it's like a balance in the universe, and the Doctor is an equal to him. Without the Doctor, he could do what he likes.
Yeah.
But I think he enjoys the thrill of the chase more than the capture sometimes. So, it's a really lovely line. I mean, Terrence Dix was typing that keyboard and there was smoke coming off it when he was writing this story.
Susan! Surely it's Susan!
Grandfather! Oh, Grandfather! My goodness, I found you! How did we get here? What's happening?
I wish I knew, my dear.
As soon as I found myself in this horrible place, I started looking for you.
The next part, we're introduced to Susan. I feel like they forgot how to write Susan. I think he should have cracked out his old VHSs, maybe.
Yeah.
Because she's probably the weakest part of this story, I think.
Mm-hmm. I think only 3 characters aren't served particularly well in the 5 Doctors. And Susan's the worst case because she gets the most to do out of all 3 of them. And it's like they didn't know it's like they didn't know how to write her. Do you want to guess who the other 2 are?
Sarah Jane.
Yeah. And
well, all of the companions who appeared as phantoms were robbed.
Yeah, excluding those ones because those obviously weren't served well either particularly.
No, I mean Liz Shaw. What the hell? She should have been front and centre.
She should have been, yeah, but there might have been behind the scenes reasons. I think a few of them were behind the scenes reasons. I know Wendy Padbury was pregnant, so she couldn't do it, but she wanted to do one scene. Fraser Hines was committed to other shows, but I think still wanted to be involved. I don't know about Liz and Mike. The other character, It's Turlo.
Oh, really?
I think Turlo is quite poorly served by it as well.
But I think it's quite funny because he's like left in the TARDIS with the First Doctor.
Yeah, I mean, that's quite funny, but I feel like Susan, they forgot how to write her. She gets quite a lot to do, but she doesn't actually. She's in quite a lot of scenes, I should say, but they don't really write her very well. Sarah Jane, for some reason, seems a little bit muted, doesn't she, once she gets to Gallifrey?
Mm-hmm.
She's a bit more of a meek, kind of whiny version of her former self.
Mm.
And then Turlo, bless him, stands in the TARDIS literally for the whole thing.
I'm less worried about Turlo though, because he had a whole arc that focused on him in the whole series that had just, aired.
And it is his era too.
And it's his era. So I was less worried. I was more upset about Susan. I was a little bit bewildered by the way they'd written Sarah Jane, because she'd lost a little bit of her fire. I think she seemed a little bit meek and unsure of everything, whereas that's not really where we left her. At the end of the Fourth Doctor's era, she was a really confident character.
Even Kanan and Company, she's got a bit of bite.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's like they forgot about that.
Liz Shaw, obviously she didn't have that many episodes, and I love Liz Shaw. And I would have loved to have seen her have a starring role as like a companion that's paired up with a Doctor.
Yeah, I think Liz Shaw is one of the most underappreciated companions of all classic Who.
Definitely. She gets forgotten so much.
She does. Yeah, she does.
Because she sort of lives in Jo Grant's shadow.
Yeah.
In terms of pairing up with the Third Doctor and Sarah Jane's shadow as well. Because the Third Doctor had two really strong companions after her. She gets forgotten, but she was phenomenal. And I really want to watch more of her episodes. I find myself wanting to watch
It's that classic thing, isn't it? Where because she's a one-season companion, and that season's squashed between two massive eras, so people tend to forget about it. And I think it's not helped by the fact that she's never been able to return for spin-off media because she passed away so young.
Yeah,
but also like the Five Doctors, she's given 3 or 4 lines. It should have been a massive deal that she came back, but it just wasn't handled that way, really.
So
anyway,
I love to see Susan. I'm glad that she was in it. It must have been really hard for her because obviously Hartnell had passed a few years before, and now she's acting opposite somebody sort of kind of imitating him. But she does a wonderful job, and so
she does what she can.
Yeah, so does Herndl in being respectful as well.
Yeah.
And I wrote that, even though it's 20 odd years since her era, it's uncanny, her voice is the same. I always find that. The voice doesn't change.
She just sounds exactly the same. Even though she looks a lot older, you can tell it's the same person. I mean, when I watched The Five Doctors as a kid, I just thought it was thrilling seeing them back together after such a long time. Because when you watch 60s Who, it being in black and white and the cameras and stuff, you can tell it's a lot older. But this is great because it's in colour and there's a Dalek in there and it's like the 60s all over again, but in colour and stuff. And I loved it as a kid. You only see the slight issues with it as you get a bit older, I think. But for a child watching it, it's great.
I didn't have any issues with this scene. I think this scene was really cool. Except obviously the elephant in the room, which they probably didn't have time to address, was, oh, grandfather, you fucked off. Where have you been? You ditched me. But maybe, I don't know what the canon explanation is.
I mean, they also committed the Caroline Ford's cardinal sin of Susan, which is that they treat her like she's a whiny human child when she wanted to be written like an intelligent, introspective alien character. Do you know?
Yeah.
That's why The Sensorites is her favourite story, because they treat Susan like an alien in it rather than like a girl. And so it's so she might not have been thrilled with the script, I don't know, but she must have had a nice time doing it, or else she wouldn't have bothered, would she?
But the scene, canon aside, is written by a fan for fans, because it's exactly what you want to see. Susan bumping into the First Doctor, wandering around these absolutely beautiful sets and facing off with a Dalek, and they defeat a Dalek together, which is so cool.
Now,
It's a great callback to 60s Who.
Yeah. And it's so funny because she said, as soon as I found myself in this horrible place, I started looking for you. Because it's It's obvious this has got something to do with her grandfather.
Do you know, I must see if I can find it, but I found a review of the Five Doctors online by someone that watched the episode when it was broadcast. And the way they were talking about it was really interesting because they said that it has a different layer to it that as a modern viewer you don't really appreciate, where they'd read the novelization of the Daleks, the original story, but obviously didn't have videos back then, so hadn't been able to watch it. They just read it. And to see this Dalek appear in a setting that seemed to be from like a 60s episode, and then immediately recognize the Doctor and say, it is the Doctor, you are the enemy of the Daleks, was like the confirmation that this figure has been this hero for 20 years at this point. And it was like a really big experience for them to see that even though they'd missed episodes in the past, it's still the same show they've read about in Target novels and stuff.
Yeah,
do you know?
Definitely.
And it must have been quite thrilling to see that. I mean, the other thing people complain about with this scene is that it's not a 60s Dalek.
This is a very unique Dalek, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's got unusual ear lights.
It's become known as the Death Zone Dalek because it's got the colours of a grey Dalek from Genesis, but with black bits on, like the 80s Daleks, which hadn't appeared yet, the later 80s Daleks. And then it's got weird ear lights as well, like you say. It's been like canonised, hasn't it, as a figure?
I really like that. That's cool.
I have to say, two little anecdotes about this Dalek that I want to talk about. The first one is I was obsessed with the voice of this Dalek when I was young. It's got a really good, scary voice, in my opinion, by Roy Skelton. And I think it's got a really good, like spooky, like grating, echoey voice. And the Product Enterprise 12-inch grey Dalek, I was bought that for Christmas 2005. And I used to think that the Dalek I had was the same one that was like portrayed in the show. And I loved that it was like the scary Dalek from the Five Doctors by comparison to like the gold one that everyone else had got for Christmas. So I really liked that because it even has red lights. When it talks, the lights are red. And then the other thing is when I watched the Five Doctors, I remember watching it with a friend Isaac years and years and years ago. And it was his first Classic Who episode. And we had like a takeaway ordered or something. And it arrived right when the Dalek appeared. And you know when the shadow comes up behind them and that's when you first see the Dalek in the Five Doctors?
Yeah.
That was right when the door rang. So we paused it on that frame and he hadn't seen the Dalek yet. And then we had our dinner and then we resumed after dinner. That was a really good point to like have us a cliffhanger. So.
Because it's all one part, isn't it? It wasn't aired in parts. That would have been a nice cliffhanger, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
But sadly that Dalek doesn't last long, does it?
No, doesn't really get a lot of screen time. There's only really 2 scenes of it, aren't there?
It reveals the most grotesque mutant with writhing fronds and like green liquid just like pouring out.
When this happens, this is the first good look at a Dalek mutant you get in the classic series.
They did do a very, very good job. It appears in Genesis, doesn't it?
Yeah, you see glimpses of them. So you see them in like tanks and stuff in Genesis. But if you remember, they're just sort of like fleshy, like strings of like, I don't know, like they look sort of gloopy.
Yeah.
Like this is the first time you see an actual creature, like an actual brain with tentacles hanging off it. And it's repulsive. And something about the way that it explodes. And then there's just like the ambient sound while it's like writhing, really creepy. In the 90s version, when it explodes, there's like this sort of screeching sound effect that was sampled from Genesis to like symbolize the creature like screaming when the top gets blown off. And they didn't reinstate that for this. But when it explodes, it's just quiet, like the original version. The structure that the Dalek's in is obviously some sort of maze, isn't it? It's like some kind of like mirrored building. Because when the Dalek energy weapon blows up the wall, you see the Dark Tower and it's quite far away.
Yeah.
So they're not in the Dark Tower, so they're in a separate building, but it's never seen from the outside. So I've always wondered about that. But then every other structure in the Death Zone that you see that isn't the Dark Tower is natural.
Yes. We have the Second Doctor and the Brigadier navigating the quarry.
Charming spot, Doctor.
Yeah. They're such an old married couple. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
And we have the Third Doctor and Sarah Jane driving around in Bessie as well.
Yeah, they get an easy ride at first, don't they?
At first, until Bessie breaks down. But let's talk about the third Doctor finding Sarah Jane first, because that's a whole moment in itself.
I think we should mention the Second Doctor bit first, because that happens before that, I think, where Second Doctor and Brigadier materialise in the Death Zone. And they see a Cyberman in the distance, but neither of them mention what it is. The Brigadier says, "What's that?" And they sort of duck down and flee behind a wall. And this hand reaches out of the wall, doesn't it? Out of a little hole in the wall. And it's a Cyberman's hand.
Yeah.
Grabs the Brigadier. Is like, oh, Doctor, help me, help me. Second Doctor starts wailing on it with like a piece of wood.
Yeah.
And then the hand goes back into the wall. But neither of them comment that it's a Cyberman. There's no dialogue about it being a Cyberman. They just get off camera and then it cuts. And that's funny to me because you know that we see the Cybermen are kind of the main enemy of the story, aren't they? So that's interesting. They don't really get a bigger fanfare until the end of the next scene where the third Doctor sees them.
I don't know if this is relevant, but in the script that I was following, there's a stage direction that says the second Doctor points to a silvery figure in the mist. In the episode, it's pretty clear as day what it is.
Yeah.
But maybe in the script, it was meant to be a lot sort of mistier and foggier, and that he wasn't meant to recognise what it was.
Right,
and
yeah, because it's not clear that they don't recognise it.
No.
The Brigadier says, what's that? And they sort of get away quickly as if they know it's dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just funny because the following scene, which we'll get to, the third Doctor says it's the Cybermen. Perhaps they were brought here by the same person that brought us.
Yeah.
And that feels like that should have been their introduction rather than this, which is just like a quick scene. But it's funny, so you know.
Yeah. And we have the third Doctor roaming about in Bessie.
Yeah. Meanwhile...
Now what?
Oh, K9, why didn't I listen to you?
Hang on a minute.
And he hears a scream, and it's obviously Sarah Jane decides to just lunge off of a side of a hill and roll down it.
It's not a very good moment for her. She just sort of wanders out of the mist and then just yeets herself down the hill, doesn't she?
Yeah, she does.
She goes,
I love it.
It's funny.
She was meant to be reacting to something.
There's a theory that originally this scene was supposed to be like a recreated 70s street kind of looming out of the mist, and it was supposed to have Autons chasing her, and that's why she's supposed to have fallen down like a steep hill trying to dodge the Autons. I don't know if that's true or not. I'd heard that it was cut because of budgetary or logistical reasons. I can't remember which one it was. Didn't have time to do it, or it was too complicated. So it was cut in favour of her just falling down a hill. But Elizabeth Sladen really didn't like it.
So this is pure conjecture. But I thought that there were two enemies distinctly missing from the Death Zone, and those were Autons and the Sontaran.
Right.
And both of those were created by Robert Holmes. So I wonder if maybe he didn't give permission to use them.
Maybe.
But anyway.
I think the Auton thing was scrapped at quite an early stage, because it might even have been when it was originally Joe scripted to be in it. I can't remember, but I think Autons were supposed to be in it, and then the other cut enemy was actually Quarks.
Oh, right.
And when the second Doctor and Sarah encountered the Cybermen with the Raston warrior robot, I think the Quarks were supposed to be there instead. I think that's right. But anyway.
I love that the third Doctor doesn't just go down the hill and help Sarah Jane up. There's this whole sequence where he gets a rope out, ties it
like
to
a
Bessie.
lasso down, doesn't he?
Yeah, lassos and drags her out.
Oh, I never thought I'd be so pleased to see anyone.
I think we should come away from the ledge, don't you?
It was such a more fab way of rescuing her. But, they have such a beautiful little reunion, and it's so right to see the third Doctor, Sarah Jane, in Bessie.
It's nice to see them together, isn't it?
That again felt like a moment written by a fan for fans, you know?
It's funny because people say that you can tell that Elizabeth Sladen and John Pertwee didn't have to go at the best chemistry because she was so nervous. And I think she was a bit unsure of him, but he was quite nice to her, I think. But I think they're fine. I mean, in The Five Doctors, it's not the best example of Sarah Jane, like you say. But I think when they get a season together in season 11, they're really good as a pair.
Yeah.
And especially because she's so feisty as well in season 11, not here particularly. She gets a little dig in. She's like, thank you very much for rescuing me, Doctor, but I'd like you to tell me why I'm here to need rescuing.
Yeah. And I like that in terms of canon, unlike with Susan and the first Doctor, it is talked about in this scene. Sarah Jane says, "You changed. Why do you look like this again?"
It's you.
Of course it's me. Hello, Sarah Jane.
No, but it's you.
That's right.
No, you changed. Remember? You became all,
Teeth and curls?
Yes.
Yes, well, maybe I did. But I haven't yet.
Oh, I see. No, I don't. Never mind.
Because it is a question you would ask.
Yeah.
Why is the old face back and he's older? So the third Doctor picks up Sarah Jane, he rescues her, and they drive off in Bessie.
Yeah.
So should we stop it there and then do like a part 2? Because
we should wrap it up there and then do a part 2, I think, so it's easier to listen to.
Okay, perfect. Okay, well, thank you for bearing with us through the first sort of half of the 5 Doctors. Do tune in for part 2, which will be out next week. Okay.
Cool. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening. Until then.